I was sipping my morning coffee when I heard the rumble louder than usual. I walked out and saw not one, not two, but 8 massive bulldozers crawling up my driveway like mechanical beasts. At first, I thought maybe the city was doing something down the road, but no. They stopped right at my property line. The lead guy in a reflective vest hopped down and waved a stack of papers in the air, saying, "HOA orders your yards being leveled today," just like that. No warning, no hearing, no notice in the mailbox. Just engines revving and blades lowering, you see. I've had a long and complicated relationship with my HOA. Ever since I moved into this neighborhood, they've had something to say about my yard. First, it was the fence being too rustic. Then the shed was too tall. And now apparently the entire yard was an eyesore to the community. I had pushed back, of course. Filed paperwork, showed up to meetings, even hired a land use attorney once. But I guess this time they thought they'd shut me down for good. What they didn't know, and what would soon have them scrambling to shut everything down, was that this patch of land wasn't just any old suburban lot. Years ago, before any of these homes were built, this area was zoned for controlled explosives testing. I had the documents to prove it. And better yet, those zoning records were still active. No one bothered to check. Not the HOA board, not the contractors, not even the county inspectors. So when those bulldozers fired up, they were heading straight into a major liability, one that could have blown up, literally and legally, in their faces. And just when they were about to start digging, something happened that made them slam the brakes hard. You're not going to believe what stopped them in their tracks, just as the first bulldozer inched forward, its blade slicing into the edge of my lawn. There was this loud metallic clunk. The machine jerked to a stop, the driver looking around, confused. Another operator radioed in, saying his blade hit something solid, not rock, not roots. Within seconds, all 8 bulldozers shut down like they'd hit a wall. The crew gathered around, trying to figure out what was buried beneath the surface. That's when one of them spotted the warning signs, half faded, but still very visible if you knew where to look. Bright yellow placards, partially overgrown with grass, marked with restricted area controlled materials below. Suddenly, the confidence in their voices vanished. The man with the clipboard stepped back, mumbling something about calling the HOA president immediately. Now, let me rewind just a bit. This land has history way more than the HOA ever cared to ask about. Long before these cookie-cutter homes and freshly paved sidewalks, this entire area was part of a testing range used by a now-defunct defense contractor. When I bought the property, I was handed a thick stack of disclosure forms, maps, and a zoning certificate that clearly labeled this lot under a very special designation. It wasn't exactly classified. It was definitely something the average HOA board would overlook if they even knew what they were reading. I kept all the paperwork filed, just in case. I never thought I'd need it, until today. What made things worse? The HOA had skipped all formal channels. No city permits, no soil surveys. Just a private contractor and a pile of equipment. They didn't realize they were crossing a serious line. And now, with the crews frozen, staring at signs that hinted at something dangerous underground, they were starting to get nervous. But trust me, what came next? That was when things really got interesting. The HOA president finally showed up 20 minutes later, driving fast and looking rattled. She stepped out of her SUV, heels clicking across my gravel drive like she owned the place. Her name's Carol Sharp. Voice, tighter hair bun, and a reputation for running the neighborhood like it was a military base. She marched up to the lead contractor and demanded to know why the work had stopped. He pointed toward the warning signs and muttered something about undisclosed hazards. Her face turned pale, but only for a second. Then she looked at me. "You didn't disclose this to the board," she said, like I was the one in trouble. I calmly handed her a copy of the zoning certificate. "Filed it with the county," I said. "It's all on record. You just never asked." She didn't say anything right away, just stared at the paperwork like it was written in another language, which, in a way, it was. The language of liability. Meanwhile, the neighbors had started to gather. Word travels fast in a community where gossip is basically currency. People stood at the edge of my driveway whispering about what the HOA might have done. A few looked genuinely worried. One guy even asked me if something might blow up. I didn't answer mainly because I wasn't entirely sure myself what was still buried under that soil. And that's when another subplot started bubbling up. One of the contractors pulled me aside quietly and said this wasn't the first time. Their company had been sent into questionable situations by an overreaching HOA. Apparently, a few months back, they were told to remove a non-compliant gazebo. And it turned out to be part of a historical landmark designation. The fines were enormous. Now, here they were, again stuck in the middle of something way bigger than they signed up for. Tension kept rising. Carol was on the phone, pacing, trying to sound in control. The contractors were refusing to go any further without clearance. And I just stood there, waiting, knowing something buried was about to change everything. By now, the yard looked like a construction site frozen mid-chaos. Bulldozers parked awkwardly, engines still ticking from the heat. Contractors standing in small groups whispering to each other. And Carol still barking orders into her phone, pretending this whole thing wasn't spiraling out of control. But it was. Big time. A county inspector showed up, apparently tipped off by one of the crew members. He stepped out of his truck, squinting at the lot, and immediately walked toward the warning signs. That's when I noticed his expression shift serious, almost urgent. He pulled out his phone, took a few photos, then looked right at me and asked, "You still have the original zoning file?" I nodded and handed him the folder I'd kept in a fireproof box since I moved in. He flipped through the documents, muttering to himself, then stopped on a page with red stamps and coordinates. His brow furrowed. He turned to the contractors and said, "Loud enough for everyone to hear. Nobody touches another inch of that soil." You could hear a pin drop. Then he looked at Carol. "You authorized this demolition without clearance on potentially volatile land." She started stammering, reaching for the papers, but he didn't let go. And that's when the real panic started. One of the bulldozer operators pointed toward a patch of disturbed earth near the back fence. Something was sticking out. Not metal, not pipe. It looked like a long, weathered casing, barely uncovered. The inspector rushed over, carefully crouched beside it, and then stood up slowly, backing away as he radioed something in. His voice was calm but clipped, the kind that makes people freeze without knowing why. The contractors immediately stepped away from their machines. Even Carol went quiet, for the first time since this whole circus began. By now, the neighbors had cleared out. Half of them went back inside. The other half watched from a safe distance, phones out, filming, probably thinking this was about to turn into a breaking news headline. The tension hung so heavy you could feel it pressing on your chest. No one was sure what was buried. But whatever it was about to decide how this entire story would end, as everyone stood frozen, staring at the object half buried in the dirt. The inspector's radio crackled to life. A voice on the other end, calm but urgent, asked him to confirm the coordinates. He didn't, and there was a pause, followed by the words, "We've got a match on file. That zone hasn't been touched since 1986. That's when the inspector's entire posture changed. He turned to me, eyes sharp. "Has this area ever been excavated before?" I shook my head. "Not once. It's been untouched since I bought it." His face tightened. "Then we might have a bigger issue." Carol was already backing up, trying to save face, still pretending like she had control. But it was too late. The county team had just confirmed that this wasn't just a testing site, was once flagged as a potential storage location for legacy materials. Stuff that was supposed to be cleared out decades ago, but according to the records, may have never been fully recovered. The words possible ordnance were thrown around. That wasn't good. And then came the second twist. While the inspector was focused on the exposed casing, another contractor who'd been walking the edge of the property line called out. He'd found something behind the old tool shed I'd barely used. It looked like a buried panel metal, bolted down with faded serial numbers on top. The inspector rushed over. I followed. The panel wasn't on any of the public records I had, not in the blueprints, not in the zoning files, not anywhere. The inspector ran his flashlight across it, then muttered something I'll never forget. This isn't just zoning history. This looks like an old vault access point. Suddenly, the yard wasn't just a hazard, was a full-blown mystery. A forgotten underground structure sitting right beneath the neighborhood. Contractors backed away, some heading for their trucks. Carol was now pacing with her phone pressed tight to her ear, voice shaking. I stood there, caught between confusion and a sinking realization that none of us were prepared for what was buried here, and whatever was locked behind that vault door. It was never mean. The inspector called in a specialized team almost immediately. Within an hour, a hazmat van and a couple of unmarked trucks rolled up, their crews moving with quiet urgency. They wore gear that made it clear whatever was beneath my yard wasn't your everyday buried junk. The vault panel behind the shed was carefully uncovered, bolts loosened one by one. When they finally pried it open, a burst of stale air hissed out, and everyone stepped back. Flashlights pointed down into the opening, revealing a concrete chamber about 12 feet deep. Inside were rusted racks, metal cases, and rows of old canisters, some still sealed, others damaged by time. The lead tech didn't say much, but I caught the word inert mixed with containment, review, and military contract archives. So, no, nothing explosive happened. But what did happen was bigger than I ever imagined. The vault was confirmed to be part of a Cold War-era research program, quietly buried and forgotten when the land was sold off decades ago. It had been missed in the last inspection round due to a clerical error. That one oversight had led the HOA right into a potential disaster one they nearly bulldozed straight into. All in the name of neighborhood appearance. The county immediately froze all further work on my property, and the HOA, us, unauthorized. Demolition was now under investigation. Carol, red-faced and speechless, was handed a formal notice right there in my driveway. The contractors packed up their machines, glad to be leaving in one piece. Neighbors started whispering a new story. Now one about buried secrets and near misses, not unruly grass. But just when I thought things were calming down, one of the specialists pulled me aside. He held up a document they'd found, sealed in a rusted canister inside the vault. "This isn't part of the military files," he said quietly. "It's a private research log, T, and your name's on the cover, page handwritten, dated just 3 years ago." That's when I realized. This wasn't just about what was buried in my yard. It was about why it was never meant to be found. I stared at that logbook for what felt like forever. The cover was faded, the pages yellowed, but the handwriting was mine, no doubt about it. Turns out, 3 years ago when I bought the house, I had written notes during an initial walkthrough with the real estate agent. I'd seen something odd near the shed, a strange metal hatch partially buried under gravel, and jotted down a few thoughts, thinking maybe it was an old septic tank or utility box. I must have filed the notebook away and forgotten all about it. But someone else hadn't. The researchers confirmed the vault hadn't been touched for decades. Whatever was inside had been sealed long before I ever moved in. but my quiet notes somehow ended up in the wrong hands, possibly in a shared file during the property transfer and were flagged in some archive. That loose thread brought unexpected eyes back to the site, and without anyone knowing it, my quiet little yard became a ticking mystery. The HOA, in their rush to control everything, had walked straight into it, never realizing they were triggering an investigation already in motion. In the end, the vault was declared safe and transferred to a federal review board. My property, protected from any future HOA interference, thanks to a new legal designation as a historical utility site. Carol stepped down from the board not long after. The HOA rules were revised to prevent unauthorized construction or demolition. As for me, I planted new grass, kept the shed exactly where it was, and added a simple sign by the back fence: no digging allowed. People still slow down when they walk by. Some ask questions. Others just nod like they know something they're not. Supposed to be funny how a little zoning mistake and 8 bulldozers unearthed a whole lot more than anyone expected.